That's really interesting. So if we can keep on the topic of team, how many people in here are like just starting out or looking to build up their team right now? Do we have a lot of people? Okay. So how did you go about, finding your core team that helped you actually get started with this? Were you looking for the same things back then? Like, were you looking for people that had like offsets, like had skill sets that were different from yours? Were you looking for just whoever wanted to jump on the project and just like work for equity, or how did you go about doing it? Because it's one of the hardest things that I've gone through, and finding just a core group of people that can really get you from 0 to 1, and then 1 to 2, and 2 to 3, and just through those, adolescent stages of a company. It's just like a baby, right? You're like birthing this thing, but you need people there to take care of it and turn it into, get it walking, get it crawling, get it moving. So how did you go about finding, I guess, your co-founders, your core team? How did you find them? How did you get them on board? And maybe even go into like, was it equity? Were you paying them? Was it a partnership? How did you kind of structure it? With Carbon Black, or even the other companies too. How did you go about that?
I was counting the number of questions you asked. I think I'm up to like 25.
Sorry.
So how about I just pick like 2 or 3?
Core team, starting out, building your team. We'll keep with that theme.
Well, I think the core team were all people I knew, and that's what led to the non-diversity. And just to be clear, we got a lot of benefits out of that too. I don't want to say that like it didn't have its benefits. We all knew what we were building. Like I said, we barely had to talk to each other about design principles or anything. We knew what we were building. We knew what the market needed. We all thought like exactly the same way. We had little tiffs about like protocol type stuff, but like it was really small in comparison, which is really hard when you're building a brand new category. I mean, Gartner actually has a category that we built. I mean, it's crazy to think. When you're building a new category, it's tough to find people who see it the same way you do, and there's a lot of friction involved with no, here's the vision. Well, I don't agree with that. There's a lot of friction and time associated with it. But and I think we did really well on the product side, but I did not emphasize nearly enough diversity on the cross-functional team. So we did hire a head of sales who basically nobody listened to, right? We did have a head of marketing who basically nobody listened to. And so because the core team of technical people that we had were so tight, because we had worked together for so long, it was so comfortable to just sort of basically say like, oh, they don't get it. They'll get it when it's produced. They'll get it when it's quote unquote done. It's never done. And as a result, we got to this point where, the traction that we saw was, a lot. It took a lot longer to build up. It took, we were basically just saying like, they don't get it, they don't get it, they don't get it, they don't get it. They'll come around. And although we might have been right, I mean that Achilles heel is what led to the merger, because we were all cut from such a huge technical cloth that we just didn't really pay attention to feedback at all. It was just basically like, if you think we're wrong, then you're wrong. That was it.
How big do you think feedback is, though?
I think it's critical. I think it's critical. Now, that's not to say that it needs to steer your roadmap, but just knowing just knowing what people think of your solution is important. You can choose to do whatever you want, but it's important. In terms of just compensation and whatnot, I think all of you realize at some point or another that your job is sales, whether that's sales of hiring somebody or it's sales of a customer, it's sales internally. Your job is sales. You are selling all the time. And so you're trying to get the best talent for a reasonable price and make sure it's fair across everybody. But early company equity is gold. And for the people who appreciate it, they'll work insane for it. So we largely used our network to get people in using the carrot of early company equity. This could be huge. It did end up being huge, thank God, because I made a lot of promises to a lot of people that it would be huge. Thank God it was. But yeah, we sold our asses off to get people into the company. And you're selling your vision all the time, regardless whether you're selling to, I mean, I've spoken to many entrepreneurs where you're selling to your parents, you know, like, I know I'm dropping out of Harvard or MIT to do this, but like, I need to do this. Like, you're always selling. And so just know that, you're always selling. And some people are going to require certain kind of comp, and other people are going to require other type of management style, and whatever it is, figuring out what they need is only going to get you a little bit further in your business. So, and everyone's different. So some people like cash, some people like equity, some people don't care about either. They just want to be on the hardest problem. Other people want to be part of a team. Some don't. Figuring out, what it is that you need and what they need, and seeing if there's overlap in that Venn diagram is critical, and then just, throw your dart right in the middle of it.
Yeah, I think it's big giving people, especially at the early stage, options as to like you said, some people really want the equity because they can see where the company's going. Other people, they just want paid. If they have a family, kids, whatever, they want just the most cash that they can for it. That's one thing that I'm learning a lot now, like going through this and negotiating all of these terms and stuff with people is, everyone has different viewpoints, so you can't just like have just one, thing that you think is going to work for everybody. But getting into selling your vision and really storytelling, because that's one thing, interviewing and having a lot of conversations with investors from our events and just our investors in our company. A lot of them just look for the story of like where this is going and being able to tell that really well. How much has that helped in raising money, or could you get into maybe some advice on raising money and talking to investors as well?
Yeah, so a few data points there. One is about 3.5 years ago, while still at Carbon Black, I joined a Boston-based VC firm as a venture partner. So part-time, really they were just buying my loyalty so that any cybersecurity deals that I saw, I would bring to them. And I got to learn a whole lot about VCs. So we could be here for like 6 hours just talking about VC. But look, the fact of the matter is that every one of us, regardless of whether we're looking to invest in a company, looking to join a company, whatever it is, like, we as humans love stories. Like, we just love stories. And I've got a ton of them. We can make this whole thing just about stories. But VCs are no different. They want to be told a story. They want to be told something interesting that has a cliffhanger at the end. And they want to believe in you. It's really what it comes down to. And if you can tell a great story, then chances are they're going to be somewhat more emotionally attached to you. And so storytelling is absolutely key. It's absolutely key. And I was just talking to a founder 2 weeks ago who said, like, it finally clicked to me that what I did before doesn't actually matter. Like, yeah, it's true. Like, it matters almost nothing what I did before. What matters is what I'm going to do. Just the same way that you guys invest in your 401k or in the market in general, you don't really care what the company did. That adds a little bit of credibility in terms of what they might do in the future, but it's all upside, right? You're investing at $100 a share now, not because they used to be 50, but because you think it can be 500. That's the same way of an investor is. And if you can't tell a big story about how this is going to 10x, then you're not going to get the deal. Because someone else, whether it was the person that walked in before you or the person that's coming in after you, is going to tell a great story. And they're going to tell a story about how they're going to 10x that money. And ultimately, that's all that really matters. VCs don't have heartstrings. You can't pull on them.
At what, because there's a lot of different ways to even build a business. And it really depends on what type of business too, if you even raise money, if that's even the right fit for you. So when is the right time to raise money? Would you recommend people, bootstrapping as much as they can? when should they start looking to get into angel investors, accelerators? When do they know that it's the right moment to look into investing? And then even at what stage, like, should they start talking to VCs? Because that's a whole different ballgame is when you start getting venture capitalists involved, you're at a whole different stage of business now, and they're going to expect different things from you. So for people who are starting out, maybe getting their first rounds of funding, friends and family, thinking about going to accelerators, do you think those are good options? Do you think people should maybe try to continue just focus on revenue versus focus on raising money as well? If you were going back, like, how would you think about building your company, from a financial standpoint? Would you do things differently? And what would you recommend to people?
Well, obviously you don't want to raise money unless you have to. It's easy to say that, but how many of us in the room have that luxury? I could probably bootstrap for me and my buddy who's willing to work for me because we're good friends. We might be able to bootstrap for 4 months, and how much traction can you show in 4 months? So I think it ultimately comes down to it's just not a luxury that a lot of people have to be able to bootstrap. So I always tell people that you should always be talking to venture capitalists, period. They see a ton of deals. So they'll be able to give you a litmus test of whether you're telling a big enough story or not, just right out of the gate. The best time to build a relationship with a VC is when you're not raising. It's one-on-one, right? You always should be building relationships with VC because when you need money is the worst time to start talking to them because they're you're just some guy from the street and there's hundreds of those, right? So they're already at a spot where they're just ready to tell you no. So anytime you can build a relationship with a VC when you're not raising money, you should do it because now it's on your terms. Hey, I'm not raising money. Here's my business that I'm thinking about. I'm bootstrapping right now. I could bootstrap forever. I'm just trying to build a relationship and get your feedback on my business. I would do that as much as I possibly could, obviously balancing executing your business. So you never ever want to walk into a VC meeting where it's the first time you've met them and this is the first time they've met you and you're asking them for money. The odds are really, really against you at that point. Not only that, but because they see so many deals, they give you a ton of advice. I've seen 10 deals like yours, right? Okay, that's data point. Or I've not seen anybody that's talking about this problem. Why is this such a big problem if nobody's talking about it, right? They can coach you pretty well if you can sift through some of the veil. So I would, if I were you, no matter whether you're thinking of bootstrap, whether you're thinking of raising money or not, you always want that option. So I would be building relationships right from the get-go. And the way that I typically tell founders is pick, if you're in marketing technology, pick the 10 most prominent marketing technology VCs and build the relationships there, because the thing I learned was security is a tough business. It's really detail oriented. Nobody gets it. So going and talking to angels is basically like rolling the dice. If you find somebody that likes you for some reason, you might get a check, but A, they're not going to be any help, and B, you might get 25 grand, you might get 100. So go to the VC that actually understands your market, because they're much more likely to give you good feedback, and they're much more likely to be the ones to say wow, they're most likely to see what you see. I didn't do that. I was dumb. I got told no 150 times. In fact, a local VC here, when I came back into the area, I just went to socialize, try to get to know as many people as I could. And I give him my whole, I'm Mike Viscuso, blah, blah, and he slides this paper across, stack of, 7 stapled pieces of paper across, and he's like, oh no, we know you. And I'm reading this paper, I couldn't really figure out what it was, and here was my executive summary that I had written for when I went to pitch the company. And he's like, I printed 2 out, one for you, just for nostalgia, and one for the guy that said no. So apparently I had pitched them before, I didn't even remember, but he was one of 150 people that I pitched, and all said no, and luckily, I stumbled across somebody who knew something about security and could see what I saw, and got my first round of funding done. So I would always be looking to fundraise, even if you don't do it, because you want that option. I'm
sure all those investors are pretty disappointed in themselves now.
Yeah.
Now after the exit.
Every VC has what they call an anti-portfolio.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's not bad being in a lot of people's anti-portfolio.
I think it's great advice. So understand the investors, their what markets they're in, even what stages that the investors are. I think is big, because some investors are early stage, some are late stage. There's a lot more that are moving into late stage, and some say that they're early stage, but they're really like seed or Series A, which in a lot of cases they're looking for pretty big numbers. So even early stage sometimes is like kind of tricky. So understand, I think, to what stage and then what markets that they specialize in is big.
Very true.
Do you have tips for like how to reach out to investors? Like, what's the best approach? Should they,
Don't fuck them. They'll come to you. You're in the security industry.
If you have a great,
hottest industry at that time.
Yeah, if you're in a great market, in a hot market, there's nothing better than them coming to you. But not everyone has that luxury. Obviously, they told you 150 times, but how did you even get that conversation, or how did you even get the meeting with them? Was there any tips, strategies that you used?
Yeah, I think, look, the same way that you go to get your first customers is the way you're going to get noticed on the VC radar. If people are talking about you, they'll reach out. So I think there's some credence to what you're saying. But I wouldn't go direct into a VC that you've never met. Like, try to find someone who they're on the board of that or whatever the case may be, to make the intro. But the best way to get a VC to talk to you is make a lot of noise in the market that you're trying to serve. People will say, hey, these guys are onto something. And look, VCs, they play in a lot of markets. They have to know a lot about a lot, and it's impossible for them to know what the next thing is. If they knew what the next thing was, then they wouldn't have such a low hit rate. So they need the validation from other people in the market to say, like, these guys or gals are doing something cool. You should talk to them. So best advice I have is generate buzz in the market you're trying to service, and you'll likely get some inbound. But it might not be the inbound that you want. And so for the VCs that you actually want to build a relationship with, try to get the referral, because that's the best way in. And like a referral from either another company that they've invested in or on the board of, or a customer that is a customer of another one of their companies. Customer's way better, by the way, but we don't always have that luxury. So get the referral in. That's a much easier route.
That's I think a lot of investors, from what I've heard, that they like the warm intros. They're looking for other founders recommending people and introducing them. If we can dive into real quick before we get into some Q&A from the audience, maybe your biggest obstacles, mistakes, things that you would have, even like regrets, whatever, right? Any obstacles that you went through that, like, knowing what you know now, if someone was starting out, that you would be like, avoid these 3 things for sure. Like, these are the biggest mistakes that you see founders make, because you've worked with a lot of founders. I know you're an advisor and on the board of some companies too. So what are, I guess, if you can narrow down to 3 maybe, or a couple of your biggest mistakes that you see people make?
Yeah, so I think we hit on 2 of them. One is seek out diverse opinions, whether they're on your team or not. You gotta have diversity in your brain. And then 2 is just fundraising is hard. It takes longer than you think. Try to raise more than you think you need. You want that optionality. I think one of the other things on the theme of optionality, it's like when building your model, your financial model, like nothing happens as fast as you think it should. So typically people say, hey, raise more money than you think you need. If it's extremely dilutive, then you might be hesitant about that. But in your model, prepare for it not to go nearly as smooth as you think. So, hold yourself to an aggressive model, but really when you're really thinking about running your business, make sure that you can have several like catastrophic failures, and it doesn't, you still have an opportunity to live, to stay alive. I certainly, one of the big things that I didn't do a good job with in the beginning was just, this is enterprise security from, 17 people that nobody knew. I didn't expect sales cycles to be 9 months. Well, guess what? Like, that's a good day. And I just really didn't understand. I just saw like people would see it, like they'd see it, they'd be like, oh my God, this is brilliant, and like, where do I sign? And that doesn't happen. Sales cycles take a lot longer than you think. So I would plan for everything to take longer than you think, plan for everything to be a little harder than you think, and plan for like some absolute catastrophic, like, oh my God, I thought our ASP was going to be 250 and it turns out it's like 40. Just know what those things are in your model, so you can say, oh wow, like I gotta change faster. I gotta adapt a little faster. So we were in a sticky situation where we had to get a bridge, and that bridge cost me, I can't even imagine how much money it cost me and the other my other teammates. But it cost us a lot of money. Simply just poor financial management, mostly on the sales cycle side. So.
Adding to that, I know you mentioned kind of things take longer than expected. I'm sure, as most entrepreneurs, myself included, you go through a lot of like stress, right? Like, this is a big thing. Do you have any advice for kind of like the personal side to entrepreneurship?
I wish, man.
or how to deal with it?
No.
I mean, any tips? Just getting through it, taking one step at a time.